The first thing Daniel heard was her whisper. Please, don't let me die. The words barely rose above the desert wind, but they cut through him like a blade. Daniel Harper had learned to ignore a lot of things in life, hunger, exhaustion, humiliation, but he could not ignore that. He had been driving home after another 12-hour shift at a repair yard that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. His 8-year-old son, Noah, was waiting at home with a neighbor. Dinner would probably be canned soup again. The gas gauge blinked empty. His bank account was worse. And now there was a girl lying in the dirt. She was slumped beside an abandoned barn near the highway, her body trembling violently under the scorching sun. Her skin was pale, lips cracked, and her breathing shallow. She looked young, maybe 21 or 22. Her clothes were expensive, but torn and dust-covered. She didn't belong out here. Daniel's first instinct was fear. He had learned that getting involved often meant trouble, police questions, hospital bills, time he couldn't afford to lose. As a widower drowning in debt since his wife passed from cancer 2 years ago, every decision was survival math. If he helped her, he might lose his job for being late. If he didn't, she might die. She coughed weakly, and that decided it. Daniel carried her into the shade of the barn. He poured the last of his water between her lips and grabbed the small container of rice and eggs he had packed for his own dinner. It was all he had until payday. Slowly, he murmured, lifting a spoon to her mouth. You're safe. Her fingers trembled as they brushed his sleeve. Why are you helping me? She whispered. Daniel almost smiled. Because someone should. She fainted again before he could ask her name. Minutes later, the silence of the desert shattered. Black SUVs roared down the highway and skidded to a halt near the barn. 3 men in tailored suits jumped out, scanning the area with urgency. One saw Daniel kneeling beside the girl and sprinted toward him. Step away from her. Daniel raised his hands instinctively. She collapsed. I just gave her water. The men rushed to her side, panic written across their faces. Miss Evelyn. Miss Evelyn. Daniel blinked. Miss. One of the men turned toward him, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock. Do you know who she is? Daniel shook his head. She's Evelyn Laurent, daughter of Victor Laurent. The name hung in the air like thunder. Victor Laurent, the tech titan whose company dominated global headlines. A billionaire known for innovation and ruthless business decisions. Daniel looked down at the fragile girl again. She didn't look powerful. She looked scared. A helicopter thundered overhead soon after. From it stepped Victor Laurent himself, tall, silver-haired, eyes sharp with both intelligence and terror. He rushed to his daughter's side. Doctors stabilized her quickly. Heat stroke, dehydration, shock. She had wandered from her disabled vehicle after a sudden breakdown during a private trip. Disoriented in the heat, she had collapsed before security could find her. Victor finally approached Daniel. You gave her your food, he said quietly. Daniel shrugged. It wasn't much. It was everything she needed, Victor replied. Daniel expected a check, a handshake, maybe a polite thank you. Instead, Victor studied him carefully. What do you do? Mechanic. Single dad. That's about it. Victor nodded slowly, but said nothing more. Daniel went home assuming that was the end of it. He didn't even tell Noah the girl was a billionaire's daughter. To him, it didn't matter. What mattered was that someone survived. But life didn't suddenly get easier. 2 weeks later, Daniel was laid off when the repair yard downsized. Bills piled up. The landlord posted a warning notice. Noah overheard whispered phone calls and began pretending he wasn't hungry at dinner. One night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table staring at the overdue electricity bill, wondering how he could possibly protect his son from a world that seemed determined to break him. Then there was a knock at the door. Outside stood Victor Laurent. No convoy, no cameras, just him. Daniel stiffened. If this is about publicity, I'm not interested. Victor shook his head. It's not. He stepped inside the small home, taking in the worn furniture and patched walls. Noah peeked from the hallway, clutching a toy truck. Victor crouched slightly to meet the boy's eyes. Your father is a brave man. Noah looked confused. He fixes cars. Victor smiled faintly. He fixes more than that. They sat at the small kitchen table. I built my empire by calculating risk, Victor said. By measuring return. When my daughter was lying in the desert, you had no calculation. No gain. You gave her your last meal anyway. Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't want charity. This isn't charity, Victor replied. This is belief. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents for a fully funded auto repair shop, equipment, lease, permits, even business coaching. Health insurance for Daniel and Noah. A small college fund already started in Noah's name. Daniel stared at the papers, his vision blurring. Why? He asked hoarsely. Victor's voice softened. Because my daughter told me something when she woke up in the hospital. She said the man who saved her didn't look at her like she was important. He looked at her like she was human. Daniel swallowed hard. Months passed. The repair shop opened under a simple name, Harper's Auto Care. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't corporate. But Daniel ran it with integrity. He charged fairly. He explained repairs honestly. He treated every customer with dignity, whether they drove a luxury car or a rusted pickup. Business grew not because of Laurent money, but because of trust. Evelyn visited often, not as a billionaire's daughter, but as a friend. She volunteered at local shelters, inspired by the man who had shown her what compassion looked like without cameras. Daniel still faced challenges. Running a business wasn't easy. There were slow months, mechanical failures, and moments of doubt. But now he had stability, and more importantly, confidence. One evening, nearly a year after the desert rescue, Daniel stood outside his shop watching Noah ride his bike in the parking lot. Victor pulled up quietly beside him. You know, Victor said, people think wealth is power. Daniel glanced at his son laughing in the fading sunlight. It isn't, he asked. Victor shook his head. Power is doing the right thing when you have nothing to gain. Daniel smiled. That day in the desert, he had been poor. Exhausted. Afraid. But he had been rich in the only way that truly mattered. Because when faced with a choice between fear and compassion, he chose compassion. And in doing so, he didn't just save a billionaire's daughter. He saved his own future. The strongest people aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones who give their last bottle of water to a stranger, believing that kindness is never wasted. And sometimes, the smallest act of humanity can rewrite an entire destiny.